She tried to evict my dog, and in that moment, I realized the fight wasn't about barking or rules. It was about power, and I refused to let her win. The letter arrived taped to my door, bold letters screaming violation, threat, deadline. According to the HOA, my dog was a nuisance, aggressive, and grounds for removal. They gave me 10 days to comply or face fines and eviction proceedings. I stood there rereading it, my dog sitting calmly at my feet, tail wagging, completely unaware someone had declared him a problem. Her name was printed at the bottom. The same neighbor who measured grass with a ruler and photographed trash cans. She had complained before, but this time she went further. She claimed my dog barked non-stop, scared children, and endangered the community. None of it was true, but truth rarely matters when someone wants control. I gathered evidence immediately. Vet records, training certificates, videos of quiet afternoons, statements from neighbors who love him. I sent everything to the HOA, confident it would end there. Instead, she doubled down. Another notice came, colder, firmer, implying animals like mine didn't belong. That's when something inside me snapped, not in anger, but clarity. I read every bylaw, every footnote, every exception. Pets were allowed. Multiple pets, actually, as long as they were registered, vaccinated, and non-aggressive. There was no numeric limit stated anywhere, so I registered my dog. Then I visited the local shelter. The first adoption felt symbolic, a senior dog with cloudy eyes and perfect manners. The second was a bonded pair who just needed space. The third had been returned twice for being too loud, which made me smile. Each adoption followed the rules precisely. Paperwork filed. Fees paid. Records updated, word spread fast. By the time I brought home dog number 6, neighbors were watching, confused, amused, curious. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching crates arrive, leashes untangle, bowls line up neatly. By dog 12, my yard looked like joy itself. Calm, trained, wagging tails everywhere. I wasn't breaking rules. I was following them better than she ever had. Her complaint stopped. The HOA went silent, and my house filled with something louder than barking, freedom. It wasn't chaos or spite driving me forward, but a quiet resolve to protect what I loved and expose how flimsy her authority really was, because every leash clipped and bowl filled reminded me that compassion, when paired with knowledge, can overwhelm intimidation without ever raising its voice. That understanding changed everything, turning fear into purpose, neighbors into allies, and a threatened eviction into the beginning of a plan she never saw coming at all. Especially once rules became tools I could finally use well. The first morning with 12 dogs was quieter than anyone expected, and that silence confused her more than noise ever could. I woke before sunrise, leashes organized, schedules written, routines planned. This wasn't chaos. It was structure. Each dog had a name, a space, and a role in the calm I was building deliberately. Neighbors peeked out, expecting madness, but what they saw was order. By midweek, the HOA sent an email requesting a compliance check. I welcomed it. Every dog was registered. Every vaccination was current. Every rule was followed to the letter. When the inspector arrived, clipboard in hand, the dog sat patiently, tails thumping softly against the floor. No barking. No jumping. Just discipline and warmth. She hovered nearby, watching, waiting for something to go wrong. It didn't. The inspector smiled, noted the cleanliness, the training, the space. He confirmed there was no pet limit stated in the bylaws. Her face tightened. Authority slipped a little more. That afternoon, she tried a new angle. She claimed the dogs lowered property values. I asked her to show me the rule. She couldn't. I reminded her opinions weren't enforceable. She stormed off, promising escalation, so I escalated first. I invited neighbors over. Not a protest. A meet and greet. Kids played fetch. Seniors sat with the calmer dogs. People laughed. Fears dissolved. The dogs became names, personalities, companions. What had been framed as a threat became a community event. Photos circulated. Smiles replaced suspicion. Donations started coming in for food and supplies. Someone suggested partnering with the shelter for adoption awareness. I agreed immediately. Everything stayed compliant. Everything stayed visible. The HOA board reached out again, this time cautiously. They asked how long I planned to keep all 12. I replied honestly, as long as needed. Permanently, if possible. I reminded them I was within my rights. I thanked them for their concern. She filed one last complaint, alleging emotional distress. The board dismissed it. The rules were clear. The community support was louder. That night, I sat on the floor surrounded by warm bodies and steady breathing. I thought about how close I'd come to giving in, to choosing quiet over conviction. Instead, I chose knowledge, patience, and compassion amplified by numbers. 12 dogs slept peacefully around me, unaware they'd become symbols, not of defiance, but of balance restored, and tomorrow, something even bigger was coming. By the end of the second week, the neighborhood buzzed with curiosity. People whispered from driveways, peeked through windows, and some even walked over just to say hello. The dogs had transformed not only my yard but the atmosphere around it. Where tension had once ruled, joy now prevailed. Kids ran between wagging tails, neighbors chuckled at playful antics, and the once daunting Karen was reduced to watching from the sidelines. She tried to assert control again. A note appeared on my door. Excessive pets are a hazard. Immediate action required. I smiled as I picked it up. Each dog had a safe, designated area. No rules had been broken. I documented every detail: yard dimensions, play areas, supervision logs, veterinary certificates. Every I dotted. Every T crossed. I was ready. I called the HOA board proactively. I explained my setup, answered questions, and highlighted my compliance with every clause. They were impressed. The attention shifted from my violation to her repeated false claims. Her credibility was slipping fast. The board even suggested that she be reminded of community guidelines regarding neighborly conduct. The irony wasn't lost on me. Meanwhile, the dogs became local celebrities. Neighbors shared videos on community groups, dogs playing together, helping socialize shy kids, even comforting the elderly who stopped by to pet them. The narrative shifted entirely. Instead of being a nuisance, my yard became a hub of positivity and connection. I realized that rules alone weren't enough. Visibility mattered. Engagement mattered. Love mattered. Karen's strategy was crumbling. She had assumed fear and quiet compliance would allow her to dictate terms. Instead, she was met with structure, community support, and undeniable proof of order. Every complaint she filed was countered by documentation, testimonials, and pictures. The HOA was now monitoring her attempts, and each one only weakened her standing further. By the weekend, my yard was a living sanctuary. 12 dogs, perfectly coordinated, enjoying their routines. Children learning to care for pets, neighbors exchanging smiles, even the board members stopping by for a quick walk through. I realized the power of turning an oppressive challenge into an opportunity for growth, connection, and undeniable proof that kindness paired with knowledge was unstoppable. And yet, the final confrontation hadn't come. I knew she would push again. I just didn't know when. But one thing was certain: the rules and community were firmly on my side. She underestimated how resilient compliance, compassion, and strategic action could be when combined. Tomorrow, the tipping point would arrive. Monday arrived, and tension hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Karen had grown restless, pacing her porch as if sheer frustration could rewrite the rules. But this time, I didn't feel anxious. I felt ready. I had 12 calm, well-behaved dogs, neighborhood support, and an airtight understanding of the bylaws. Every step she took toward conflict was met with preparation and documentation. That afternoon, she attempted her boldest move yet. She reported a noise disturbance, claiming the barking and playful chaos were unbearable. I collected timestamps, videos, and audio clips proving that the dogs were active during allowed hours and quiet otherwise. Every record lined up perfectly with HOA regulations. I submitted it immediately. Proof, as it turned out, was stronger than intimidation. Curious neighbors had gathered quietly, observing her repeated attempts to exert authority. Her frustration was obvious. She shouted complaints from her porch, waved papers, and tried to rally others. But her audience had shifted. The neighbors weren't intimidated anymore. They knew the dogs, the rules, and my rights. Support replaced fear, and her authority dissolved like sand through fingers. The HOA responded swiftly. They acknowledged the complaint, reviewed my records, and confirmed that everything was fully compliant. Any further false accusations could result in penalties. Karen's shock was visible. She had assumed her power came from intimidation, but it had evaporated under transparency, documentation, and community awareness, by sunset, the yard was calm again. The dogs lounged peacefully, wagging tails occasionally brushing against children who played nearby. Neighbors came by to share stories, laughter, and even homemade treats for the animals. The HOA issued a friendly reminder to all residents about proper channels for complaints, subtly reinforcing boundaries without confrontation. Karen had no recourse left. The rules weren't just on my side. They were reinforced, supported, and publicized. I sat on the porch with the dogs around me, watching the neighborhood's energy shift. What had started as a threat to my beloved pet had turned into a celebration of compliance, patience, and strategic action. Fear had been replaced by joy. Authority had been countered with knowledge. The dogs weren't just companions. They were symbols of resilience, order, and victory. One final step remained. Karen needed to understand that her intimidation tactics wouldn't work anymore. But how? I had a plan. And this plan would ensure not only my peace of mind, but also set a precedent for the entire neighborhood. The next morning, I executed the final part of my plan. Not out of spite, but to cement a boundary that would last. I invited the HOA board and a few neighbors to a casual pet day at my house. The 12 dogs ran freely in their designated areas, playing and socializing under careful supervision. Children laughed, adults shared stories, and the energy was overwhelmingly positive. It wasn't a protest, it was proof. Proof that rules were followed, lives were enriched, and threats held no weight. When grounded in order and preparation, Karen appeared, of course, expecting confrontation. She walked onto her porch, arms crossed, face tense, ready to dictate or scold. But something was different. The atmosphere had shifted. Neighbors ignored her glare, engaged with the dogs, and even waved cheerfully. The HOA representatives were present, observing and nodding. The power she had relied on, intimidation and fear, had evaporated completely. I approached her calmly, smiling. I didn't shout, accuse, or argue. I simply explained that every complaint had been addressed, every rule followed, and that the dogs were within HOA regulations. The board reinforced it in front of her, making it clear any further harassment could result in penalties. Her fury was palpable, but she had no support, no justification, and no authority left. She retreated silently, and for the first time in years, I saw the neighbor everyone feared finally powerless. Over the next few days, a sense of peace settled across the community. Neighbors who had once hidden indoors began visiting, chatting, and playing with the dogs. The yard had become a hub of positivity. I documented the experience, not for revenge, but to show how knowledge, preparation, and compassion could transform conflict into harmony. What began as an attempt to evict a beloved pet had evolved into a lesson in resilience and accountability. Each of the 12 dogs became more than companions. They were symbols of persistence, justice, and community. The HOA reinforced rules fairly, neighbors learned to stand up for themselves, and the woman who tried to wield control learned firsthand that authority has limits when challenged thoughtfully and legally. Sitting back on the porch, dogs resting at my feet, I realized the greatest victory wasn't just keeping the pets. It was reclaiming peace, setting boundaries, and inspiring others to respect rights and kindness. The lesson was clear. Intimidation can be countered with strategy, compassion, and careful planning, and sometimes, standing your ground can turn a threat into a triumph. And in that quiet moment, I smiled, knowing the house was no longer just mine. It was a sanctuary, a safe space, and a statement that fairness and preparation always win.